Welcome back to the Leadership Zone. In this episode, we're going to talk about why every leader needs a guiding philosophy and set of values. You see, while your leadership purpose might change, because leadership's a social construct, you only can lead if you have followers. You can only lead if there's somewhere you're going, if there's a North Star, something you're aiming for. And that will differ if you move organizations or you engage in different industries. While that does differ, usually a leader's signature, brand, philosophy, values is weaved throughout their career, and it's not often intentionally set out. But by the time you get into a leadership position, it tends to be there in the ethers. It tends to exist. People feel it. They talk about it. It's how they position you. It's how they think about you. It's how they make sense of how you make decisions they don't like, they might not approve of. So a leadership philosophy is really important. A leadership philosophy is not just about having some manifesto, while it is partly that. It's also having something that you lean on as a person when things are difficult, or when people are withholding validation or approval, or when you're in doubt of the best way forward. Your leadership philosophy allows you to make decisions that are guided by who you are and what you value, rather than allowing you to be overly dependent on external validation, feedback, or approval. And while leadership is this moving thing between you and others and a task, because it doesn't exist, it's not just about people following leaders, there's also a task involved in the dynamic. While it is those things, your leadership philosophy supports you in leading in a way that is aligned with your values and your beliefs. Now, without a leadership philosophy, kind of some of the signals that you don't have one or you're not clear on one is a lot of self-doubt arises because you don't know what you're measuring your success against. Usually you're measuring it against external feedback or tangible outcomes. But often in leadership, there aren't tangible outcomes. A lot of your work is relational. A lot of your work is influencing. A lot of your work is creating a sense of psychological safety in the environment and inclusion, and valuing people and setting standards in terms of values and practices. It isn't always about what you achieve, which is usually how people get into leadership positions. They were usually quite effective in achieving things as a solo contributor or as a member of a team. Whereas in leadership, it's far more about your ability to support others. While many people will say that they didn't intend to get somewhere or they don't know how their career led them here, what you will see when you look back over your own career and other people's career is the values and the interests that guided them, the philosophies that they lived by, influenced where they were more successful and less successful, where you thrived and where you just survived. And so understanding what your leadership philosophy is allows you to know when to put a stake in the ground. It helps you make decisions when there's maybe not a possibly great outcome, or when there isn't enough information to make a good decision. So a leadership philosophy ultimately is the opportunity for you to acknowledge your guiding principles and decision-making factors prior to the stretches that occur and the challenges. And without one, what tends to happen is people have more self-doubt, as I said, but also there is a sense of, never really knowing where they're going, not really being sure where they're leading people, not sure about the behaviors and values they're trying to role model, not sure when to step up and say no and when to let something flow, because they're using other things to make decisions rather than their leadership philosophy, the task at hand, the followers involved in the process, and they themselves as the leader. You see, leadership isn't just about being in a position of power. There are lots of informal leaders. And a lot of informal, what I call social leaders, are people who embody trust and engage people even without authority or power over. And then some of those people become formal leaders, and other people just become formal leaders with none of that previous influencing. But without that leadership philosophy, it becomes really difficult for you to bring clarity to your communication and to your decision-making, for you to be able to build a leadership brand where people say, well, no, that's how that person works. If they made that decision, I imagine it was based on X, Y, and Z. And so that leadership philosophy can underpin all decision-making and communications, and it can start to influence people in the direction that you're attempting to lead them. And that will be different for every one of you based on the work that you do. Just think about some of the main politicians. They had leadership philosophies, some of which you probably love and some of which you hate. But they did have philosophies that they used to guide them. And those philosophies then were often adopted or integrated by the people following them. Not just them as the person was being followed, but the philosophy was bigger than them and was pointing towards this North Star. So when you think about leadership philosophy, if you can't generally lean on it, if you can't find your relationship with how you wish to lead, then it's going to make it really difficult for you to be effective, but also it's going to make it easier for you to be undermined, manipulated, and overlooked. Because without that leadership philosophy, almost like a backbone to your leadership, you're asking people to simply trust in you as a person. And while that's fine to some degree, your leadership philosophy allows them to go beyond you as the human and see that you are working towards and with a philosophy that encourages you to aim for better and that guides you in your decision making. This helps people build trust as well, because they know that you are using this to make decisions, and this then therefore guides them in how they see you and your leadership brand or signature, how they make sense of, can they trust you? They might not be able to like the outcomes, but can they trust the way you came to those outcomes? So leadership philosophy, if I'm going to leave you the couple of things to think about, is first of all, what do I stand for? You know that saying, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. What do I stand for? And it doesn't have to be grandiose. It can be very simple. What do I stand for? First one. Second one is, what kind of principles or values do I want to use in decision making? So for me, inclusion, integrity, compassion, but accountability. There's a couple that have to be mixed into my philosophy so that I keep a balance in my work and I don't end up on one extreme or the other. And then the third thing, once you've kind of thought about what you stand for, and then you've thought about the values you want to make decisions on, it's worth thinking about, when am I most challenged? When do I find it most difficult to be in a setting, in a particular incident or situation? And by thinking about that, you're going to see when you may need to utilize your leadership philosophy, what you stand for and your values more. You may see that you need to develop some approaches, strategies, beliefs, or values around dealing with these challenging situations, because a leadership philosophy isn't really needed from day to day, although it should guide you. It's most important when you are being challenged, when you are under pressure. Do you act out of a place of defenses, or do you take the time to figure out a leadership philosophy and how it might be helpful in the most challenging times? And so you do that last. And when you've done that third piece of the challenges, you go back and you say, okay, how does what I stand for relate to this? How do my values relate to this? Is there something I need to reinforce? Is there something I need to get clearer on or loosen up? And so that is a way to begin developing a leadership philosophy. Another one, just to throw one in, is come up with a quote that you really like that seems to guide you. I have a quote above my desk all the time. It's what I set my business up on, and it is, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And the reason for this is that if we're waiting for things to be perfect, they'll never start. And if I waited to be the perfect coach, the perfect author, the perfect facilitator, the perfect trainer, I wouldn't do anything. So pick quotes that guide you. Another one is Ruth Ginsburg's quote, which is, enduring change happens over time. She said it much better, and I butchered the quote, but that's a really helpful one as well. So think of quotes that kind of guide you. And these are almost like your manifesto or your philosophy that you will go back and tweak and update as needed, but you use it as a backbone that you lean on when all of your triggers are triggered, when the challenges are up, when your insecurities are up, when the tensions are up, when multiple stakeholders want multiple things, you come back to your leadership philosophy. And you may need to sometimes adopt it and adapt it. And that's part of leadership maturity and moving past, maturing as a person, but also as a leader. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's also a kind of manifesto or a backbone that you use to support you during challenging times and in decision-making and communication. And without that, you may give mixed signals to people. You may be easily undermined, manipulated, misunderstood. So this philosophy can really help you in holding your own position and then deciding how you approach your work. There are links below for additional things that you can sign up to, like the leadership letters, but also there are some opportunities that are in the description that you can use, and you can @ me at Sheila Walsh1 on any platform, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok even, and I'd love to hear from you. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for listening.